Hi, today we're gonna be talking about how we can create business solutions without using any workflows. So why do we need to use workflows at all? Well, SharePoint forms and lists are pretty dumb. When you need some background logic, background actions, there's not much that you can do without using some kind of a mechanism. So, for example, we can create a approval process or a staged based process based on SharePoint lists. So we will need some kind of a background logic to implement that. So why is that a problem? Why I personally have apparently something against workflows. So the problem is not the workflows themselves, but mainly how and when we use them. Workflows require a lot of training. So there are many situations in which a process was developed by one employee, that employee left, and now there's nobody to take care of that business process and support it. But there are also some limitations to the workflow model in SharePoint on its own. So first of all workflows are executed after the actual event that triggered them happened. So for example, you updated an item that caused the workflow to run, but the item has already been updated. There's no way of preventing that from the workflow. The other thing is that the workflows are separate from the item on which they execute. So you can see the current status of the workflow by clicking on a special column, but it still requires you to take several steps to see what's going on, and it's not very user-friendly. Workflows are also primarily event-based. So workflows run when items are created or updated, but when you want to run a workflow based on a timer, such as 1 week after the item is created or maybe every Friday, that's a little bit more complicated. And another major issue with workflows are the process of deployment and versioning. So to deploy a workflow requires some extra steps, and then this new updated workflow creates a new version that some of the items will still run on the older version, some of the items will run on the new version, creating confusion. And as I was saying about the training, many non-trained people saying something like that will be a little bit taken back. Okay, so what types of workflows are available to us? So we can use SharePoint Designer. It's actually the easiest one. Pretty limited, but there are some third-party custom actions that you can install that will add additional functionality, but it's still pretty limited, still requires an external tool to develop and run it. You can do custom development in Visual Studio. I would highly recommend against that. It's when we're talking about training and support, that's the hardest one to train for and support in the future. And there are several third-party solutions that take the SharePoint-based workflow or their own implementation and bring it to the point where it's all very visual, very non-development oriented. So we can use that. Okay, so we are actually proposing, offering you a way of doing it completely in a different way, not using workflows for every single business solution that we want to develop. So first of all, we start with smart forms. So the forms themselves will already include the necessary logic to implement a large part of our final business solution. Then we have a concept of actions, which is a simpler, more user-friendly implementation of business logic that you can configure directly within your lists and document libraries. We also have the ability to import data from external sources such as emails or databases and integrate it into SharePoint. Alert mechanism that replaces the need for built-in alerts or many types of workflows that serve as alerts, and the printing functionality to then print or convert to PDF and send to external recipients. So let's start with what we call smart forms. So first of all, advanced validation rules. Beyond what SharePoint can do on its own, validation rules that use regular expressions or even beyond that. Advanced default values, default values that can be specific to certain users or certain content types and so on. Dynamic rules, meaning that by changing one column, I'm setting value to a different column based on my rules and conditions. Tabs and column permissions, both static and dynamic, ability to subdivide your form into tabs and then assign permissions to each one of those tabs. For example, a approval tab that's only open to a certain group of people. Relationships, the ability to create single to multiple relationships inside the SharePoint form, being able to implement anything from a purchase order or a project with subtasks and so on. And there are a set of additional column types that allow to implement advanced things within regular SharePoint forms, such as, for example, electronic signatures. Let's talk about actions now. Actions basically replace the need for workflows in many scenarios. They have a much simpler interface for configuration. You can do basically anything with actions. There are enough action types to basically implement anything you want. Actions can run before and after save, so actions can run before the actual save happens and, for example, prevent it from happening. There are many scenarios where you want something like that. Actions can run on a timer as well, so they can run according to a date in the columns. For example, one day before the due date or 1 week after the created date, or they can run weekly, monthly, daily, and so on. Actions can also be executed manually, so you basically expose an action as a ribbon button. So let's see a quick demo, and we'll see why we would want to use actions or smart forms or together, and why it's so much easier to do. Okay. So first of all, my first example would be a regular SharePoint context list. You're probably familiar with it. It contains columns such as first name, last name, and full name. Now, full name is basically, in most cases, is just a combination of first and last name. But how many of you would go and create a workflow that will generate that full name automatically based on last name and first name if the user left it blank? I would say almost nobody, because the overhead of doing something like that is so large that you would just not consider it. It would be a lot of work for such a small bit of functionality. So first of all, let's see how it can be done with a smart form. So I'm creating a new item and I'm putting in, for example, my last name and my first name, and you see that it's already filling in the full name with my full name based on a dynamic rule. So it basically creates a new value based on the two values that I've entered into two different fields. Very, very simple, intuitive, does not require any workflow or background logic, and very simple to do. And that's it. Another option would be to actually use an action, use some kind of a background logic that will happen after I save for different reasons. We can do that with an action, and I'm actually going to show you how such an action can be configured. So for that, we just go to design. This is the button that we had. And then you go to actions. These are all the features of Ultimate Forms. For now, we're only using actions here. So I'll go to actions and I say, I want an update list item action and call it set full name. Okay. And what it does, it goes to the current list, current item, sets the full name field to a combination of first name, and then add a space, and then last name. Save it, add this rule, and now I'm going to tell it only to affect the current item. So basically saying ID equals the ID of the current item. We can actually update multiple items if we want to. In this case, we don't. And I'm only adding a condition saying that only run that when full name is actually blank. So if the user entered something on his own, we don't want to override that. So I'm going to click on Save Now, go back to that list and add a new item. So the same thing that I did here. So you see that it's not actually filling anything because it's going to happen behind the scenes after the save. So click on Save, and you're going to see that the action actually takes longer than it takes to save the item. So I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to see the result right now. Okay, fantastic. So just one little thing. If I go and I look in the version history, I will see that there are two entries now. There's the entry of creating the item and the entry of updating the item with the action. So in many cases, we do not want that. We actually want it to be done in one save. For example, if it's a regulated system and we don't want too many entries appearing in the version history, I can easily do that. We already talked about actions being able to run before and after. So if I change this action to run before the save, we can actually push those changes directly into the SharePoint's save process and not create a new item. So all I need a new version history entry. So all I need to do here is basically say I want this action to be synchronous. That means that it happens before. Just save that, and now go back to the list, and I create a new item. And you see that it's already there. If I look in the version history, you'll see that all three fields are filled out at the same time. Fantastic. So what else can we do with the form? How we can improve the form in SharePoint to make it work better and look better. So let's see here. Let's create a new item. So you see that form has been enhanced. So this form is now it's subdivided into tabs. So we put different types of data into different tabs, and we also have now two layout columns on the form instead of one. And when I create a new item, let's just go and I save it, I can now look at it and you will see that the design is preserved across the different forms. New form, display form, and edit form as well. It's very easy to do. So let's take it up a notch and let's try to develop something that is already an actual business system. So an example would be a purchase order. Now the purchase order requires all of those things that we saw now, but it also requires something beyond that. The relationships, the ability to have tabs with permissions on them. So let's see how it could work. So first of all, let's look at one of those items. So you'll see that we see the supplier, the salesperson, we see multiple line items, and we see the approval on a different tab. So let's try and create a new item. So first of all, you see that there's no approval tab at all. So we are setting in permissions for it not to appear in the new form. We don't need it there. Now we select a supplier, and we'll see that the names of salespersons are filtered accordingly. You can even add new ones directly from here if you want to. Let's now add a couple of items. So let's say again table. Let's say it's $200 and we want 5 of these. So you see that I also use the dynamic rules here to calculate the total. Very convenient. And the same will go for chairs. So let's add let's say $50, and they're gonna be 30 chairs. So you see that when I add an item here, it automatically goes and it's linked with its parent item while still having its full context menu, and you can manage it separately from the parent as well. Save it. It will calculate the summary for me as well. It will calculate what's the total, what's the tax, everything completely automatically. Now if I go and I edit this item, you'll see that I'm locking down the first tab. I don't allow any more editing, but I am able to approve it. So I'm just going to change the status to be approved and enter a electronic signature. Okay, I can write directly on the screen if I want to. And now you see it's signed. Now if I try to edit it, it's going to be completely locked down. Both tabs are locked down. Now let's take it further a little bit. Well, let's say that we want to manage those tab permissions dynamically, hide and show tabs as we enter data. So if I click on the list of insurances here and I add a new insurance, I can select what type of insurance I want. So the main details are here, but if I select home insurance, I will see home details. If I see vehicle insurance, I will see vehicle details. So the form can change accordingly. And now let's talk about actions in a real-world scenario. For example, when I manage a list of projects. So someone comes and they want to create a new project, and they put in the project name, and they put in a description, they put in the start date and end date, and when they save it, the project is sent to an approval stage. Maybe the person receives an email saying that they need to approve it. So the project is in the list, it's still not approved. So let's see what happens when I actually go and approve it. Okay, so lock down again, go to approval, and can change the approval status. But let's see what happens when I do that. What happens is these tasks, these actions are going to be executed automatically. So the first two create two related tasks. One is create resources task, and the other one is create a budget, or approve the budget rather. The other one creates a subsite for this project under the current site. Another one creates a new task list in that newly created site. Another one creates a new task in the new task list of the new site. Another one creates a SharePoint group and assigns it to the new site, and one links the site back to the current item. So let's see how it happens. Obviously that's not going to happen immediately, it's going to take a couple of seconds. So we are going to be waiting for that to happen. I think the tasks are the first to be generated. So if we click here on the task column for details, we will see that these tasks are already done. They are right here. And if we open up the item, we will see them also on the tasks tab that we have here. So we have the relationship again. And I think it's already done. So we have the link for the site, the newly created site. So let's go there. It's just a team site, but let's see, we have the tasks list that we just created, and there's a new item there that says assign users to group demo 9 members. So let's see if we can find that group now. We can find it right under the site permissions. So the site has unique permissions, and the group and myself have permissions for this site. Okay, so why would we use import? So we can import from emails, databases, web services. It's an automated process. It means that it runs on the schedule automatically, for example, every 15 minutes or every month. It can create new items, it can update existing items, it can sync, meaning both create and update whatever is needed. Business scenarios, help desk solutions, data collection, or even email-based approval can be easily created and managed using this approach. Alerts. Unlike SharePoint alerts, we can use both internal and external recipients, so we can send to our customers and so on. The recipients can be dynamic. For example, the approver for this item can be different from the other item, so we want to email that specific person and not just a general group of approvers. We can have date-based notifications with the repeat functionality. So for example, 2 days before the due date, we start this nagging email that says please complete the task, and we do not stop until they actually complete it. We can have conditions. So for example, only send me a notification when the amount is greater than $10,000, and don't bother me with all the small stuff. And you can also create user-defined email templates. So the email can look exactly like you want it and not like a generic SharePoint email. And for print, we can have our own user-defined print templates. For example, the purchase order that we saw earlier, we can print it in a way that it will look exactly like we want it. It can be for an item, for a whole list of items, or for a calendar. We can have our own custom headers and footers. We can then convert it to PDF. We can also email it directly with attachments as a PDF, for example, and we can even automate the whole process with actions. So we can have a weekly email that is sent to a group of managers with the summaries of weekly sales, for example. Okay, so you can download the trial of Ultimate Forms. That's the product that does all that we talked about, and you can easily use it both on premises and on Office 365 and implement your business solutions without having to use workflows in most cases. Thank you.